cleanse the space. Beautiful. Welcome, beautiful people. So before we get started, I'm going to give you guys a couple of disclaimers. So due to us, and by us I mean my production company, Autumn Horizons Productions, due to us just taking on a lot of projects, and not just taking on projects, but I also am a very studious person, and I'm trying to, move further in my career with my life. It's a lot of work. So due to us doing that, this is going to be the last episode that we make on this channel for a little while. We're going to take a bit of a hiatus. We made it to episode 5, which is a good enough accomplishment in my opinion. And I'd really like to, give really you guys some time to find your way to us, and finding our channel, really feeling what we're about too. But we have some bigger projects that we're working on. Currently, and it's a lot of work. And needless to say, we're taking a bit of a hiatus from this channel just so we can really buckle down and focus on the bigger projects that we have going on. And if you follow us here, I'll probably put little blogs out on here about just stories and the experiences that we've gone through, that we've undergone to make this stuff happen. And you can always follow us on social media as well. We are also on Instagram and TikTok and all of the, the big main ones. We also have a link tree that we also have our own little link tree, so you can find all of our our handles there. So you can find us, and we'll still be connecting with you guys on different portals. It's just when it comes to this channel, we're going to be taking a bit of a hiatus, just for time's sake. And as I said, I think it'll give you guys kind of a chance to follow us on other, on other platforms and see kind of the bigger projects that we're working on. So, all good things, and it's just, it's just a moving forward type of situation sometimes. So, with that being said, without further ado, welcome to In Light of Spirit. Thank you for joining us again. I just made an offering. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to kind of set my intentions. That's always good. Whenever you light a candle, you should really set your intentions with it. And the best way to do it really is to say it out loud. You want to make it a full body experience. You want to verbalize and really speak your manifestations into existence, right? So I'm going to set my intentions. I'm lighting these candles to connect with my Ori and honestly show the world what that means to connect with my Ori right now, so that they can learn and grow spiritually. So I'm going to set my intentions there. Nothing but light, love, and nothing but light, love, and growth, healing, good balanced energy, I would say. Those are my intentions right now. And I haven't read my cards yet, so I'm going to do that really quickly while I get into today's topic. But before I do that, I have one more disclaimer, and that is this. I try to say this with every episode. This episode, or this channel is not about exploiting or bad-mouthing any religions or other spiritual practices. This channel is only about speaking about my own practices and talking about my, speaking on my, my journey, as well as talking about the history and the anthropology of these spiritual practices and where they come from, as we know them today. And when I say as we know them today, I mean down to talking about biorhythms and the actual, because spirituality actually is a form of science. It's actually a form of science. Most people don't even know that. But it actually is a form of science, even more so today because of some of the discoveries that we've made in the past 10 years. Maybe not even discoveries, they might have just been uncoveries, really. They've just been things that have been uncovered, and in a sense rediscovered by humanity. So, when I'm talking about that, I mean things like biorhythms. You can scientifically measure biorhythms. So when we incorporate those things into, our astrology, which is quite frankly a science as well, you can measure that with astronomy, like all of this stuff, it is interrelated, and so you can actually measure these things, particularly now that we have, again, uncovered some of these other sciences that are out there, which include string theory as well, and that what used to be a phenomenon of parallel universes. It's been proven that we have a multiverse. So, with that being said, this channel isn't about, again, exploiting other religions or spiritual practices. It's not about that. It's really more or less about bringing them together and using history, anthropology, and even science to back it, We're going to talk about angelology, so the study of angels. There's a lot of interesting practices with them, but for my part, because for those of you who know me, you know that I don't practice any Judeo-Christian practices. I'm not Wiccan either. I practice Santeria, that is Ifa-based, and quite recently I've started looking into Umbanda, Kimbanda, because those things are kind of the same. They just have different names, but they're pretty much the same thing. Same concept, but just some different little tribal idiosyncrasies, I guess. It's just like the Caribbean versus Brazil, but it's kind of the same concept. You even have your ancestry, which I think is really cool. Before we get into the depth of that, I actually recently did a small little interview, and unfortunately, the day I did the interview, it was storming here, and the interview actually got cut short because we had a power outage in the middle. But take a look at that. Here's what we talked about. Here's what happened. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I have my friend Rachel here. We've been friends for, probably 12 years now?
I think so, yeah. 2016, oh my gosh, like 10 years.
10 years. Yeah, so 10 years. Because my life is so fast, I always add like 2 years to everything, I guess. But anyway, Rachel, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody, about yourself, how we know each other, what your spiritual background is.
Yeah, so my name's Rachel. I had the pleasure of meeting Andre in college at that time. We were at swing dancing, and I was just immediately drawn to his aura, and we kind of started hanging out from there at school. My school, we didn't go, but he would come to campus and hang out. I grew up cradle Catholic, so very different spiritual direction, and for those of you that don't know, that means you're born into it. You don't really have a choice. So that's kind of the first... Well, it means
that they baptize you at birth, and then start catechizing you, teaching you about the Catholic faith.
Exactly.
From the time you're in kindergarten, basically, yeah.
Yeah, you literally don't have a choice. You're just boom out the womb into the church. So, yeah, very different spiritual direction. I pretty much identify as agnostic at this point with my own personal spiritual practices, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Um, but yeah, he's just been a huge inspiration and like somewhat Sherpa to me when I have questions.
Stop it. Well, let's get into that really quick since you mentioned it, and then we'll kind of get into the topic at hand. But so agnostic. What does agnostic mean to you? Because I mean, I'm sure it means something different to everybody. You know, it's with spirituality, it can be very individualistic, case by case. Because you all have your own mana. You know, you all have your own spiritual journey. So, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, so labels are a tool. We use them, we wield them how we see fit along the lines of the definition. So for me, it's you're open to a higher power, but like you don't necessarily know what it is. Like you believe that there's something going on. Like you're not as there's nothing, no God, no nature, no whatever. Like to me, that's kind of ridiculous. Like it's not by chance that we're here. Science tells us so many things. I have personal experiences that I'm like something is going on, but I am very science forward. Like give me the facts, give me the research, and then go from there. So I think there's something. I definitely am more inclined to nature and reincarnation. Like energy very much is important to me. And yeah, that's basically in a nutshell.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, agnostic is a way to put that. I guess from my perspective, I would say, if I were defining the same thing, I would just say that I'm spiritual and not religious.
Right.
Just because, I mean, I look at all those things as tools or like maybe some guides or a way of looking at things, but they're not all like 100% absolute. Like, and they're all kind of saying the same thing, you know? They're all saying the same thing. It's just from like a slightly different perspective. It's like you put 10 people in the room in different parts of the room kind of circling around, and you all look at like a boulder, but just from like a different angle. And you're looking at the same boulder, but you're seeing a different angle of it. So like this side of the boulder might have a crack, this side of the boulder might have a dent, this side of the boulder might have like blood on it or something from a human sacrifice, or you know, somebody getting their head bashed in. I don't know, but like you're all looking at the same boulder, but it's just like a different perspective. And to me, that's what religions are. They're all saying the same thing. They're just trying to teach us how to be human. And
absolutely, that was a perfect illustration.
And be aware of a higher power. But it's just like they learned it. They looked at it from a different perspective, and a lot of it has to do with like geology, you know, or geography, really, you know, because land is kind of different all over the place, but it's still land, you know.
Absolutely.
So you have different climates and temperatures and stuff like that. So a lot of it is kind of like that, you know. I will say that I think that some of it stems from our connections with extraterrestrials, because you know until about maybe 1,000 years ago, I think we still had like we were more open in contact with extraterrestrial things. So I think a lot of our like divine knowledge with a lot of religions comes from extraterrestrials kind of showing us things, and then those extraterrestrials becoming like gods or deities or whatnot. Like I believe that, you know, and the more that we've acknowledged that stuff is real in this century of things, I think it just paints more of a picture of like, you know, maybe Hinduism came from Syrians, you know, the extraterrestrial genome of like the Syrians or something, you know, or like Norse mythology might come from the what am I trying to think of? The starseed, Palladians, you know, maybe that came from a more Palladian history. You know, Palladians came down and tried to like help us live in that part of the earth and mixed genomes with us, because that's what happens when you put two life forces together. They create and they bone. So like
the new energy is created.
Well, yeah, and you have maybe a new hybrid species that came from us that was human and Palladian, and that's how you got Norwegian people. Maybe, that could have happened too. I believe that could have been part of the mix, you know.
Okay.
Like we already had people that had less melanin just from living in colder places, but maybe the way that you got like that platinum, like white, platinum blonde hair, blue eyed person is because that person is actually not a recessive gene, but maybe just a mixture of genomes with Palladians. So like, I believe in that. I believe that like that was part of the mixture as well. So again, that interview got cut a little short, but yeah, it's kind of all very interesting. And when you incorporate, ooh, that thing is starting to pop. Offering is going crazy. When you put everything all together, you have like layers of adaptations that have been taken from, a something that was real once, or like maybe just like an interpretation of an adaptation. You have a legend, of that was an adaptation or an interpretation of somebody's actual life. And then, so you take all these layers, and then you throw in like your star seeds, meaning we have extraterrestrials that have been on Earth with us the whole time. And the American government just decided recently to be like, yeah, they're real. Yeah, they've been among it. Like, most of us already knew at this point. We're like, yeah, whatever. Like, release the files already. Release the Epstein files already. Yeah, no way. We already knew that. We already knew these things, But we've had, I think that we have our human genome as humans, but I think that, extraterrestrials have been around the whole time, and we've probably mixed and mingled with them, and so, some of our, I want to say, ethnicities, races, cultures, spiritual practices have evolved and adapted from that as well. And when you look at some of these deities, gods, demigods, or celestial beings like angels, or in my case, orishas, you can see how like maybe some of these deities came from extraterrestrials that were looked at as gods because they just they knew how to utilize their abilities better than we did at the time, or maybe they were more evolved, or maybe they could do things that to us seem supernatural. So we looked at them as deities and gods and goddesses, and all this stuff. And so if you really look into your starseeds too, and you look at kind of what they're about and kind of delineate like, okay, well, they have this kind of a culture, maybe these beings, the Palladians, came up with like Norse mythology. They were the kind of the pioneers of like Norse mythology. Maybe the Orionians, the people that come from the Orion starseed, maybe they were the pioneers of Catholicism, in Rome and stuff like that. And the list goes on. The list goes on. If you look into your star seeds, you can kind of delineate like, okay, well, maybe this culture comes from this star seed. So there are those components of any spiritual religion. And this is a bit of a tangent, but I say it just because angels are actually an adaptation of what I believe to be Ori or Orishas. Even biblically, the 7 archangels are talked about in the Bible. And that concept came from the 7 African powers. The 7 African powers, which are the top 7 Orisha that a person can typically work with. You know, when you call upon the 7 African powers, that means that, like, you mean business. Like, what you're doing is pretty important. So, that's a pretty clear-cut example of the fact that it's an adaptation. This thing is sizzling. I might have to, like, put the fire out soon. Let's talk about angels, because that is, in fact, the topic. To start, so in the Bible, they mention angels. You know, they mention angels, and the angels are more of like, they're more or less messengers. You know, messengers of God. And then you have demons, actually, which are their counterpart. They're opposites. And those are messengers of, evil, the devil. You know, angels are angel good, angel God. Demons bad, demons evil, demons devil. You know, so they're messengers of those things. In the Bible, that's really all that is said about them. They don't really acknowledge them much, which I find really interesting. About Christianity is that when it comes to the politics of things, and just like the political, very trying to be black and white, political, like right and wrong, biblically, like, they're very much about that. There's no really gray area. However, when you look into, like Wicca, they tell you way more about your angels. Let's see, such as, like, there are ranks. You have your cherubims, and your ranking in your cherubims, and then you have your seraphims. And then they tell you not just that there are archangels, but that, like, what their archetype is. So, like, I believe you have Michael of the North, and Raphael of the West. You have Gabriel of the East, and Jeremiel of the South. I believe those are like, those are like, so you have archetypes there of the directions. When you think of, like, the directions kind of have, like, Watcher of the North, and element. The directions also have elements, right? So you have the North, element of air, invention, communications. You have the West and the fires of creation. You have the East, yeah, I believe the East, which is like of earth and beauty or something, and then you have, like, South, which is of the waters and the powers of emotion and intuition, right? So you have all these archetypes, and you get a lot more from Wicca. And so I like, again, that's more of like a pagan and nature-based practice. And there's people have tried to make an adaptation of, like, Wicca-based Christianity, and it's like, okay, like, whatever, Christ, whatever you need to do to be happy, Christ consciousness. But one way or another, you've basically, Wicca in itself is already an adaptation of an adaptation. Wicca is an adaptation of paganism and Christianity. Like, Judeo-Christianity kind of looked at from a pagan aspect already. So now you're trying to make it more Christian focused. So that's like, Wicca Christianity is basically like an adaptation of an adaptation of an adaptation. Because here's another thing. Christianity in itself is already an adaptation. Christianity, especially Protestant Christianity, is an adaptation of Catholicism. Catholicism is your first real branch of Christianity, you know, mass branch of Christianity. And Catholicism is a huge set of adaptations. Catholicism took a bunch of mythologies and stories and basically, like, put them all together and turned them into a big narrative about Jesus, a character actually, named Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ isn't a real person. He is a character that was derived from a real person named, you know, Yeshua. And Cristo was what Yeshua called his form of consciousness, you know. So, yes, he was an African man named Yeshua. So they took that, they took him and like maybe some little bits and pieces of truth from his story and turned it into this whole narrative. That's what Rome did. So that Rome could get control of certain parts of the world. It was just like literally a way that Rome wanted to get everyone on the same page. Essentially, you know, Christianity was just one big political campaign. Essentially, you know, it was a big political campaign that took a bunch of adaptations and put them together. I don't want this to offend anybody, so that's all I'm gonna say about that. You know, it is. But just to give you guys some names, for those of you that do believe in angels or utilize angels, or are curious to look into them, you know, I'll give you some names of angels that you can look into, that you can literally Google. So you have Michael, you know, or Saint Michael the Archangel. We have, it's actually Gabriel of the South. Gabriel of the South. You have Jeremiel. You have Raphael of the West. I think Jeremiel is of the East. I can't remember. But yeah, you have Michael. You have Gabriel. Raphael. Jeremiel. You have Aziraphale, and he's just a dominion level. I didn't say that either, but so yeah, you have your cherubims, you have your seraphims. Cherubims are like in heaven closest to the throne, you know, or like kind of at the office in heaven, at the kind of the call center. They're kind of like, you know, the nucleus of heaven, I want to say, kind of the center point. You know, they're near the throne or in heaven, like in the kingdom or at the office. So they stay in heaven, typically. You have seraphims that are kind of their messengers. They go in between heaven and earth all the time. They bring the messengers down. And then you have dominion level. Dominion level angels can take the form in the ether, much like seraphims, or they can take the form of a human sometimes. Henceforth, the term earth angel. They can be messengers in the form. They can take the form of an animal. You know, sometimes you see animals and they bring you signs spiritually, so they can do that. And then some people believe that angels, you know, like the fae or fairies. In Africa, you call them yombos, or you know, some cultures call them devas or nature spirits. But some people believe that the fae are also a form of angel. So those are, yeah, just for you to know, like, those are the rankings. But again, we have Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Jeremiel, Aziraphale. Let's see. You have Ariel, Uriel. Let's see. I'm surprised I remember all of these because it's been a while. Oh, and then you have Metatron and Sandalphon. And Metatron is like, Metatron is a rank up from Michael, actually. A lot of people don't know about Metatron, but Metatron is like a rank up from Michael. You know, Metatron is like he's like the angel that basically like holds the universe and the cosmic balance on his shoulders. So that's interesting. But so extraterrestrials have been with us the whole time. So when I think of, you know, when what I was taught about the Orisha is that, you know, they were ancients with us and they were messengers to Aladumare, which is the creator. You know, he's essentially what you would call God. You know, Aladumare is the creator of everything that we know to exist. And so the Orishas were the ones that came down and helped create the earth and show us how to live on earth. And we're children of them, essentially. So these were real beings, and they were probably, they at the time were probably extraterrestrial. And or, I guess, hyper-evolved humans. You know, they were like us. They were hyper-evolved, though, meaning that they were evolved way beyond where we were when we first came on Earth. Like, they were trying to show us how to get there. You know, get to the levels and the, you know, get to the phases of evolution that they're at, right? So the Orishas were real people. And the story of Orishas and the Yoruba traditions and Ifa traditions, those are the oldest ones. They go back, I would dare say, even like pre-Sumeria. So again, like, I think it's just good to know that, you know, as a rule of thumb, but you can still utilize the adaptations. You know, the power comes from, you know, the power and the energy, it all comes from you. It all comes from you. So if you really believe and you really focus in on these energies, then you're going to manifest what you're going to manifest. You're going to manifest as follows. Because we're humans, and that's what we can do. We can manifest things. So it's a rather beautiful thing. But to put everything in retrospect, you can look up all of these names of angels and read their archetypes. You know, I've done my reading on them. It's been years. I haven't looked into them because I don't really practice that. But you know, for all the names that I gave you of angels, and another good point of reference, if you really want to study like angelology, there's actually a book on angelology by Rosemary Ellen Gilly, and she's the niece of a very famous couple, and they're some of the most renowned demonologists in American history, but she's actually the niece of Lorraine Warren. So as in not just Lorraine Warren, but like Ed and Lorraine Warren, you know, the demonologists. The Conjuring movies are about Ed and Lorraine Warren, right? So she's a very good reference point. She has books on Wicca, angelology, demonology. I think she even has books on like herbology and like herbs that you can use for saging, you know, saging your house and doing cleansings and all that good stuff. So, you know, very good point of reference if you really want to get into that stuff, you know, and get into angelology. But you can also look up the names that I named in this video and check it out for yourself. Because, I mean, it's too easy to Google anything. You can Google anything today, obviously. Or you could find this video, you know, and, yeah. But I want to thank you all for the support. I want to thank you all for joining me on this channel. And again, we're going to go on a hiatus for a little while But, you know, because I had to work my way, you know, we had to start raw bare bones with these first 5 episodes. You know, I really had to work my way into having this nice little setup, this altar, you know, with my little Maria Paglia candle. Like, I had to work my way into having all of this, and honestly, doing it like this is how I wanted to do it from the get-go. I just had to, like, get the materials to do so. And so, you know, next time, this is the environment that it's going to be like. It's basically going to be like you're sitting with me and we're reading my cards and talking about this stuff together. And, you know, if you can join me on my live feed when because I record my live feed too when I'm doing this, and the point is to interact with you. I do a whole segment where I interact with you guys and do Q&A sessions with you guys. So if you want to join me on there, we can actually have a dialogue, you know, and talk more directly about this stuff, and maybe even have some healthy debates. You know, that's the direction that I want this to go when I start this back up. But again, just bear with us. And if you follow all of our other socials, then you'll be able to see the bigger projects that we've been working on. So, thank you for joining us. We will see you soon. I promise. Be blessed, lead blessed lives, and call in if you need anything. Because again, like I can always pull a card or two for you. Always willing to, you know, draw a card for somebody that needs it. But without further ado, I'll see you guys later. Like,